on. I have to accept. Perfect.
All right. Welcome to the Athletes Nutrition Podcast, where we talk about everything nutrition for high performers. Today is a really special episode for me because it is a topic that I feel has to be spoken about much more often. And I also have on a special guest who is an international sports dietitian and also a friend of mine, Giulia Baroncini. Giulia is a sports nutritionist with a degree in human nutrition and expertise in functional medicine nutrition. She is an International Olympic Committee licensed sports nutritionist, the team nutritionist for AC Milan Football Club, EA7 Armani Olympia Milano Basket, and she's worked with over 200 elite athletes worldwide from soccer, NBA, track and field world championships, and rowing world championships. So welcome.
Hi to everybody. Hi to everybody. It's a great thing to be here with you today, and it's a big pleasure to talk with you, Jaclyn, today.
Thank you. Today's topic is we are going to be talking about Ramadan. And Ramadan is a holiday that is celebrated by the Muslim population, and it happens to be coming up in March 10th. And it affects people that play sports, mostly international, but definitely some people in the United States. And I myself, when I was a dietitian for the NBA, found myself in a little bit of a rut, having to quickly understand and learn the practices of Ramadan, but also how to apply them in pro sports or in a sports nutrition practice. And some of the people I reached out to at the time happened to be overseas because there is a much more larger Muslim population that is playing the sport of football, or as we call in the United States, soccer. And most of the literature and the research is done overseas. I really don't even think there's anything right now from the US. But let me just get into a little bit more about what Ramadan is and how it's applying to our athletes. So Ramadan in the Muslim religion is basically defined as a time where they are fasting, where no food and no drink is allowed before the first light of dawn until the setting of the sun. It is celebrated because fasters believe that they'll become more conscious with God by abstaining from things that people take for granted. And one of the things is water and food. It's a time for religious people to reflect on the purpose of life and grow closer to God. And many Muslims also maintain fasting as a time to relate to people in poverty or to foster feelings of empathy. So I've actually worked with players that might not have practiced the Muslim religion year-round, but found that it was important at this time of year to really relate to other people and other people in their religion and to practice the fasting of Ramadan. This year, it is from March 10th to April 9th. It's either 29 or 30 days, depending on the moon cycle. And the fasting times are between 5:46 a.m. and 6:48 p.m. in the beginning of Ramadan. And then it switches to 5:52 a.m. to 7:21 p.m. by the end of Ramadan. So the time actually gets larger and larger as we move on with Ramadan. And for somebody who works in basketball, that actually interferes with, or I don't want to say interferes. For somebody who works in basketball, that will actually overlap with the beginning of most basketball games. So we have to really think about how we're going to implement these nutritional practices to get our players through the beginning of a game and also throughout practice during the day. Do you have anything to add to the practice of Ramadan that I may have left out? Because admittedly, I'm not Muslim, and I've really just had to read and learn about it from the people I've worked with.
Also in Italy and in particular in Europe, this topic is a very tricky topic because we don't talk more about this situation. And also I found a lot of athletes that aren't well educated about this moment of their season and about this situation. So is for a nutritionist, for also medical staff, performance staff, is the very can be a very big problem to manage also the the performance in general, but in particular the recovery, because the most important thing when when you work with an athlete is to speed up the recovery, in particular after practice or after matches. And this is a very, very particular moment. Fortunately, this year, the Ramadan, if you talk about Italy, where I'm actually working, is from March to April, and in this period is not a bad period for us, because the temperature, the weather is not so bad in this period. Is not so hot, so warm. Is simply to manage hydration state and other situation. But for example, something like 4 years ago or 5 years ago, this period was in August, and in Milan in particular, the temperature was very, very, very high, and we had a lot of problem about hydration and health conditions. So this is the most important thing that we have to put attention. I actually working in a club, in a sport club, in a team sport club like football and basketball, and I have also some private clients. But usually, if I have to give you a number about an average, I have an average of 2-3 athletes during the Ramadan every year. I don't know if you never work with Ramadan athletes too.
I did last year when I was in the NBA, and it very similar. For some reason, it's not spoken about. It was actually kind of kept on the hush, and I did find out because we got to a situation where one of our players was, hitting a wall, I would say, complete glycogen depletion, not just dehydration, but complete nutrient depletion. So it became a situation where I had to be involved. However, had I been involved sooner, it wouldn't have been a situation. And I think, and I can't speak to why it's not spoken about because it's not my religion, but I do think that there is not a lot of conversation around it, and there's not a lot of education around it. So it's not something that people might not feel comfortable discussing, or maybe they feel like they're outcasted because they're doing it, or maybe dietitians don't feel comfortable bringing it up. And that's part of why I wanted to do this podcast, because I do think that all dietitians should be aware that regardless of what you think or don't think, you may have somebody on your team who is practicing Ramadan. And just to get a little more specific with it, basically there is I personally look at it a little bit opposite. I look at it as the first meal, which is really the first meal for me, and that's the iftar, and that's the meal after the sun sets. When I lay out a schedule, to me, that's almost like the first meal, where normally, first meal will be breakfast.
Yes, right.
And then, suhoor, which is the meal that is going to be the last meal that's eaten before the sun rises. And so as a dietitian, we have to figure out between that sunset and the sunrise, how are we going to get in all of these calories, replace what was missing, get in the hydration, and also our athlete has to sleep. And when you're playing in a team situation, you're on the road and you're flying and you have practices. And a lot of things that I read in the research, they suggest, change practice around the time of day of fasting, which is not up to us. It's completely not up to us. And you can't take a starter and say to coach, like, hey, can you leave him out for the first 20 minutes of the game? Like, that's not going to happen. So you may have a starter who needs to play, and you have to have them prepared. So I've personally worked with one in a team situation and one in a private situation. And that's not much, it's two, but it's two situations that have really prepared me for I feel like I can really support somebody through Ramadan. You mentioned something that I thought was really interesting, and working in an NBA situation, it's a controlled temperature. So I don't have to deal with the elements, but I know a lot of times in football, and there's also other high school and collegiate sports that are going on in the US at the same time. So we're not just addressing pro athletes, but there might also be youth athletes or student athletes who this applies to that are out in the elements. And also, like, Major League Baseball is going on. I can't rule them out. They potentially could have people celebrating Ramadan. So something that's really been fortunate for me is a controlled temperature environment. But I think, touching on the importance of hydration, what are some of the tactics that you've taken when it has been hot out and you have to deal with the elements?
You have put attention into the big problem that we have in football, in particular, as a sport team and as an outdoor sport. You cannot manage the climatic condition because depend by the weather. And I told you, now we are in a period in which we are lucky because it's not too high. But the second thing is usually in a team, in particular in my team, we have two or three athletes this year that practice Ramadan. So, but the roster is composed by 25 athletes, so it's impossible to change the training schedule during the day, and in particular the matches. But what happened is that for the first team, we have a practice in the morning. So we are pretty lucky because the athletes can do the last meal before training around 6:30 in the morning, and then have after 2-3 hours the training. So you can, if you can manage perfectly the meal before the training, the athletes can perform in a good way. And fortunately, in Italy, we have the match take part in the evening around 8:30 on around 9 p.m. So there is a sunrise, sunset, and the athletes can also schedule the meal before match and the meal after match. So you can give the good energies, the good carbohydrates, the good protein source before the match and after to recover better. But what is the difficult part is work with female athletes and work with the young athletes, because in Italy these two teams are not so lucky as the first male team. Because, for example, for the young team, the matches are always around 3 p.m. So 3 p.m. is the worst situation about climatic condition in Italy, because the temperature is higher during the day, and because the last meal that you had was very time ago, around 6 a.m. So when I work with a young athlete, and I have this year, I think, 2 young athletes that will do Ramadan. So this is the very tricky, because you have to manage perfectly the time, the windows of the opportunity to eat during the night. These are the two very difficult situations. Another difficult that I have with the football team is about glycogen depletion, because is different. Another big difference between basketball and soccer is that the basketball have a very congestionated calendar. With football, we have usually one match during a week, and sometimes, but just sometimes, two matches in a week. And these two matches are separate between 62 hours, maybe, more or less. Very it's very rare that we have the matches after 48 hours. And for sure, never less 25 hours. But in soccer, the tricky condition is to recover the glycogen depletion, because during a soccer match, usually your storage about glycogen, it will be usually you use not whole your glycogen, but most of this. So you have to be able to replenish this condition in very quickly. And this is the bigger challenge in soccer, even outside the Ramadan period, but in particular in this situation. In soccer, in fact, there is a heterogeneity in muscle glycogen storage and the utilization during high intensity intermittent exercise, with the fiber type differences as well as differences between single fibers of the same typology. So this heterogeneity may result in a high proportion of individual fiber reaching critically low glycogen level, despite the fact that the whole muscle glycogen storage size is not fully exhausting during 19 minutes soccer game usually, but sometimes happen depend by the matches, depend by individually situation for sure.
So I just want to say what you said. So you're saying that there's a heterogeneous muscle fiber that's more predominant in soccer players, and that muscle fiber will use up glycogen faster than your typical. And this, are we talking like a fast twitch muscle fiber? Is that, or is something different than that?
No, yes, there are. When you play during the match, during a match, football match, you use differently and fiber in your muscle, and this fiber use differently the carbohydrates and the depletion of the glycogen in muscle are very individual, depend by the composition of your muscle and composition of percentages of what kind of fiber your muscle is composed. So this is for say that during soccer usually you spend 19 minutes on the field, and players that usually play the whole game can be covered 12 kilometers, more or less, from 10 to 12 kilometers, and depend also by genetic condition and individual condition. You can use differently and use and finish your glycogen storage. And sometimes happen that differently from basket, in some matches you can completely exhausted your glycogen muscle storage, so you have to replace this situation. And you aren't when you are in on Ramadan, you aren't in normal condition. You have the normal condition of matches, but the day after you don't have the 14 windows opportunity during day to recover your muscle glycogen. You have to do this just after match, in the meal after match, and in the meal before to go to sleep. Because another important thing for athletes, for recovery athletes, is also the sleep. Yes, so you haven't to manage also the sleep deprivation. So you haven't so much opportunity to replenish this the muscle glycogen storage. So this is one.
For my American listeners know, you know, the amount of kilometers, like 10 to 12 kilometers, is anywhere from like 6 to 8 miles. So you have a soccer player who is doing about 6 to 8 miles in a 90-minute time period, and some of them will play the whole game. Versus, you know, our longest games are football, but people are in for 2 minutes, out for 2 minutes, in and out. But a basketball game, you're going to have somebody play 35 minutes. It's going to be a lot. You know, maybe someone's playing 38 minutes. But that's going to be the most you're going to see out on a court. And a lot of guys are playing 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes. So it is much, much different. And the amount of distance covered, and I don't know off the top of my head the amount of distance covered during a basketball game, but is definitely not close to 6 miles. So anybody who's an endurance athlete can understand how that feels. If you didn't have your gels or your goos or your carbohydrates, you hit like a wall. You hit what we call a wall where like your body cannot move anymore. And when you start to feel that full body muscle cramping, it's not electrolytes, it's you're completely depleted of glycogen. And so also people understand we can only replace glycogen so fast. We can't just say, okay, well, here's 1,000 carbohydrates, just eat them. Because even if we're using 2 different carbohydrate sources, your body can only, like your muscles have to uptake it. Your body has to digest it. Your stomach has to be able to handle it as well. So we can't just push it all on you and say, okay, here's your carbs, go back to sleep. It's every hour. And we've done this, and I've done this in fight replenishing of glycogen or weigh-ins. You have to manage how much carbs somebody can have based on their body weight every hour. So there is a lot of scientific formula behind it. And it just takes time. And in the situation I was mentioning, you know, I had an athlete who was getting away with it for like, I don't know, maybe it was like 7 days, 10 days, but little by little, every day, not replacing those storages, then your fuel tank, basically it's like replacing your fuel tank a quarter, or a half. It's not going to take long before you're on empty. And so you might not think about it as it's not enough. And you're like, oh, well, you're still getting that meal and you're going to sleep and you're waking up and having that meal, but it's not enough. It's not enough to keep up with the output. And so if you're not very strategic about it, you're going to fall into the empty side fat pretty quickly. And it takes a lot of dedication from the athletes as well. So there's that too. I mean, I feel like people mostly who are going to do Ramadan are dialed in on it, but you can't say that about everybody, because you would think that all pro athletes are dialed in on their nutrition anyway, and they're just not. And they're like, well, I've gotten this far, you know, I'm kind of elite, I don't have to pay attention to nutrition rules, right? And it's like, no, your body is not going to just allow you to do whatever you want. And then on top of that, we do have the hydration, because if we're going to give you a gallon of water and you're going to go to bed, guess what's going to happen? You're going to wake up and pee all night long, right? So you're not sleeping throughout the whole night. And then at a more scientific level, carbohydrates and electrolytes, everything is kind of competing to get into the cell. And so bigger molecules are going to get in faster than others. And so we really have to lay out a scientific plan of like, how much electrolytes you're taking in, how much carbohydrates, what time schedule is that, and what does that look like?
For example, you know, during the season, the athletes go to consume from 6 to 10 grams for kilogram of body weight during the day. And in particular in soccer, these are the average amounts of carbohydrate that we suggest. But this is very tricky to maintain this gram for kilogram to body mass during the Ramadan period and during the night window. What usually my athletes eat is a complete meal during iftar. I try to give to them many suggestions to use in according to scientific literature to have 1 gram for kilogram of body mass about carbohydrates and 0.4-0.5 grams for kilogram of body weight about protein. Sometime during this period I save a little bit of vegetables, because you know create a lot of volume in the stomach and sometimes can affect and reduce the possibility to introducing more macronutrients and calories, because another tricky point is to maintain a very high kilocalories intake about these athletes. But it's important.
Do you find that by reducing the fiber that you start to get some constipation issues?
Yes, this is one I want to say. In fact, is a tricky balance, because you haven't to you cannot eliminating completely the fiber. You have just to reduce, and sometimes I need to use some probiotics to help the gut system. Also because, you know, every time that you change something in your behavior, in your food habits, your microbiome affect something different. So in particular during Ramadan, and if you also reduce dramatically the vegetables, this is a big problem for constipation or other gastrointestinal complication. So you have to find a balance, and sometimes I use also support of probiotics or a fiber in addiction to don't create a lot of volume in the stomach and permit to the athlete to eat the meal, but help at the same time. So it's a month. It's a month. You cannot. You have to find a good balance. Also in this period, if you, I think that you haven't to eliminate completely the vegetable, but you have to manage the situation, because also after a very big period in which the athletes don't eat, yes, he is hungry, he is starving, and start to eat very 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 quickly, and he feel very full early. So you have also to educate the athlete to consume in a calm situation the meal, and take a breath during the meal, and don't be starving when he sit down and finally eat the meal. This is another behavior that as a nutritionist we can explain better and manage and educate the athletes too, in my opinion.
I think that's the one positive of NBA is that although, so the NBA schedule, so people understand, is on game days, we have something called shoot around in the morning. So let's just say a player has, eaten his last meal of the morning. They don't just get to sit around all day and keep that stored carbohydrate. They have something called a shoot around. So they have to go into the arena, and it's not like an all out game, but it's an hour, and it could be a little more intense on some days than others, but you are using up that energy. And so when the game starts, and a typical game could be 7 p.m., it could be 7:30, but we have to bank on the fact the game's starting like 7:30. And as I mentioned, sometimes sunset pushes into like 7:21. So I will actually bring food to the side of the court, water and electrolytes and some type of food. I've used fruit, whatever they're comfortable with. Fruit usually goes over pretty well. And handed it to them on the bench so that they were able to eat as soon as that fast break. So I like printed out or wrote out actually a little calendar of what time what time the fast was breaking so that I could have it there on the bench. And at home, for home games, it's a lot easier than away. I mean, luckily I ordered the food, so I could request what I needed for him, but not everybody is that person. There's strength and conditioning coaches that are sometimes in charge of this, or athletic trainers that are in charge of it. And you have to just work with what's given to you. You don't have the luxury of also being able to order and label the food. But I do know that it was a lot easier at home because I had our head of our kitchen staff involved too. So if I was doing something else, when that time would come up, I had the athletic trainer on board. I had the head of our kitchen, our front of house manager. So we all worked in conjunction to make sure, like 7:19, okay, Jackie's got the food to bring out. Because in a perfect world, I'm standing there waiting, but something else could happen at 7:19. So it does work out for us where we can slowly kind of give them some food during the game. And you see that you can actually see players kind of come back to life too. I mean, and that's really, I noticed it, to be transparent, I noticed it before I found out, because I was like, what's up? And I'm always watching and observing the guys, and I'm like, what's up with him? Like, why does he seem like really like out of characterly exhausted? And that's the same day that I found out that, he was fasting for Ramadan. So it was interesting that I was able to observe it. But you do almost see like a wake up in how their energy is, because don't forget, your brain uses carbohydrates as well. And when you're playing these sports that require so much fast thinking, you're not just physically depleted, but your brain's depleted also. So that's definitely something to take into consideration. Now, do you guys have to do this on the road as well? Have you run into any issues doing it on the road?
Yes, on the roads, everything is more difficult because if we talk about the first male team, the problem are very less, because we have a private chef that travel with the team, so the chef can manage perfectly the meal and provide the correct meal. For example, during the night, he can prepare the meal that the athlete can consume into the room, and this is very easy. But if you don't have the chef that travel, that is on the road with the team, this is more difficult, because you have to be very connected to hotel staff, and ask and prepare and schedule perfectly the meal for example, prepare the meal that the athletes have to consume before to go to bed during the dinner. Or, for example, open the breakfast time in the hotel early just for these athletes. Or you nutritionists, you have to provide this food and bring to your athletes to give the opportunity to eat before the sunrise. This is the most tricky part. So also for example, with the young team or with the female team that they don't have a nutritionist that go on the road with the team too, team manager do this work, but team manager have a lot of work that he have to put attention, and sometimes is tricky and is difficult to find a solution for an athlete when we are on the road. Another difficult part is if you don't have the nutritionists that follow the team, is prepare supplementation, because for example, I suggest some supplementation before, after, or better, after the last meal before the sunrise, and usually is 6 a.m. in the morning, so you haven't another component of the team that manage the supplement if you don't not be here with the team. So the athletes have to be well educated to manage also the supplementation before after the last meal that he usually do. For example, I don't know if you use a supplement before after, immediately near the sohor, but sometimes I suggest to use not a slow release carbohydrates, because usually the training will be after 3 or 5 hours. So I cannot find a product, a supplement that is helpful in this phase. But what I use is a slow release protein for maintain the protein balance during the day.
Would that be like a casein protein versus a whey protein?
Yes, okay. Yes, because for example, during I don't know, is 5 or 5:30 a.m. So it's a sohor, or 6 a.m. sohor, and the athletes eat the complete meal. After a little bit before the sunrise, I suggest to take another part of protein, a slow release protein like casein, because if you eat another food, is another volume that you introduce in the stomach, and sometimes the athletes is difficult to take. So I use the support of supplement in this situation. Also before to go to sleep, for example, because I suggest to have the heater, the first meal after sunset. Then there is a match or whatever, and there is another meal, and this meal is very close to go to bed. So if you have if the athletes have another little bit time, I suggest him to eat something, or in case I suggest to take a supplement that cannot impact the volume of the stomach, and can go to sleep, and the digestion is not so compromised. I don't know if you use
you mean like a protein powder?
Yes, like a protein powder. Yes. But if the athletes have a good opportunity and feel comfortable to eat before to go to sleep very close, I prefer to use a food for sure. But sometimes I had one athlete that was very difficult to eat before to go to sleep. So we have also to manage the sleep, the good sleep. So we have to find a good balance about that.
So I did,
and
ours is a little different. We have our last game, you know, their last meal is going to be after the game. So their first meal, I'm sorry, is after the game. So it's hard to get in more than one meal. They're going to get one meal and then go to sleep. But in the morning, I try to get them to sleep in as late as possible, but they're going to have to wake up and have that, you know, I would say it's probably 2 hours between sunrise and maybe shoot around. It depends, you know, it just depends on where we're at. If we're at home, some days we cancel shoot around if there's a game and there isn't shoot around. So there isn't any practice, but I did try to use a slow release carb last year. And I would do it again, except I've seen some research come out saying that slow release carbs might not be advantageous for your gut. It might not be advantageous for the actual glycogen replacement. And that's something I've been reading in the literature the past few, like 6 months or so. And I have to dive into that a little more. I don't know if you've seen that, but they're even seeing some negative side effects of slow release carbs on the GI tract. And, you know, a lot of them were developed for people that were diabetic. You know, the one big brand in the United States was developed because the owner's daughter was type 1 diabetic. And so it does work in a diabetic case, but we're not working with diabetes, we're working with athletic performance. And so I don't know if it's translating over as well as we thought. And the last thing I want to do is give somebody a stomach ache and then they don't keep their food in, which is a whole nother issue. So I don't know if I'd use slow release carbs again, but that was something I did try to use. Now, my players didn't complain about it last year, but just knowing what I know, I'm not sure if I would go on that route again.
I never use slow release carbohydrates because with a perfect planning about nutrition and about the meal, I can cover the needed in the different meal opportunities. And for example, in my condition, really, I had the situation that in the morning, the last meal, the athletes do the last meal at around 6 o'clock, and the training will be part around 10:30 or 11. So I never use a slow release carbohydrate because there is the possibility that you go in hypoglycemic situation before training. Also, if you use a slow release carbohydrates, I never try to monitoring with a glycemic index this situation, but is a good point to study about if you use, I don't know, some carbohydrate slow release. This is, I talk about supplement, but for example, if we talk about food, for sure, the Sohor meal, the last meal, in my opinion, have to be composed by carbohydrate rich in fiber, like a whole meal carbohydrates, and combined with some fat, like almond, like nuts, like something like that, that can permit to carbohydrate to be released very low in the blood and maintain sensation of fuel more in the time. Another thing that I don't suggest, and you have to put attention in particular in during the Sohor meal, is to don't create the meal too much salty, because you don't have possibility to drink after. And you have to put a lot of attention, because some of my athletes prefer a breakfast like with bacon or something like that, but bacon is very salty, and ask the needed to drink water, for example. So you have to manage also the situation, because you know another big problem during the Ramadan period is the water, is the hydration state of the athletes.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Have you had any situations, any situations that have gone wrong? Like, what's your worst case scenario during this time period?
Fortunately, not a bad situation or health problem, but I had one athlete that didn't say to me that follow the Ramadan too, and he fortunately he didn't play too much because it could be a problem about also injury state, muscle injuries and something like that. But really, he gained a lot of fat in this period because he did a very long period of fasting, and after, in the feeding time, he ate a lot and completely bad food, because in his mind, he said, I didn't eat for a lot of hours, now I need to to gain what I lose. And he eat very fast food, very bad food, to try to recovery. But this is because he don't say it with nobody in the medical staff or with me also that he follow Ramadan. I follow Ramadan. So what I say is that the athletes aren't so available to talk about this situation with nutritionists and with medical staff too. And this is a big problem because they have to understand that they can have a lot of helpful from nutritionists and from medical staff and performance team too. I don't know if you have a similar situation, you had a similar situation or whatever, but yes, this is what happened to me. Not a health problem, but a body composition problem for sure, because he gained something like 3 kilograms and about fat. So
that's something.
Unfortunately, he didn't play.
That's something that we see a lot, and with Ramadan, that happens with non-athletes too, because people want, like you said, they figure they're fasting, and so there's actually a lot of weight gain that happens when you look at the research during Ramadan from people who don't follow a nutrition plan because they're not properly refueling during that time period. And just because you're fasting doesn't mean you can just eat anything you want in the off time period. But I think the big takeaway here is, you know, like, we're educated and we are here, we know the science and we know how to implement it, and we're here to help the athletes. And, you know, I don't know about you, I always get a little nervous going into any type of protocol when it's like a weight cut or something like Ramadan or something fasting. You know, I know the science and I put it into play, and it, knock wood, things always work out for the best, but you still worry. But I think at the end of the day, we have to understand, we have to trust the science and trust ourselves and know that like following a protocol is going to help you versus not doing anything. And I think also knowing that that we're here, that's our job. Our job is to support you no matter what it is. It doesn't matter. And it's not just Ramadan. I try to tell people, like, if you want to do, I don't know, if you want to be a vegan, if you want to do keto, is it what I want you to do? No, but I want you to tell me and trust me that I'm going to guide you through it, please. You know, so we could do it correctly. And so I think that kind of comes into play here as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, this is the same. And what I don't know if you analyze the body composition of the athletes that followed the Ramadan, but what I saw, I used this DEXA scan, and I saw that in average situation, I noticed a weight loss, little decreasing, but very, very little in list of tissue, but not excessive, and an improvement about fat mass. If the athletes follow the suggestion, a good suggestion, and yes, follow a good nutrition plan, a good nutrition tailored nutrition suggestion. I think that the list of tissue decreasing is also due to a bit of glycogen depletion during this time. But yes, I never see a bad condition about body composition, but improvement in this period. But this happened in this situation in which the athletes follow a tailored food plan during this period. I don't know if you never saw some about body composition, analyze body composition before and after Ramadan.
I mean, I've read research, but I haven't gotten to do it because either I'm not with the athletes or they're not telling us. So it's not like, and then what am I going to do? Make somebody into a science experiment who is already, doesn't want to talk about it. So, I think that's why it's good that there is the research being done overseas and in Europe, and there are people that are willing to participate in that research. but I don't see that something that's going to happen in the US anytime in the near future because it's such a big deal. I mean, if you think about some of the major sports players that have come out about it, and then you hear all the criticism around it, and it's like, well, it's not up to you, you know, like they're doing what they have to do, and why does everybody have to comment on it? So imagine them trying to do research behind it too. I just can't imagine it, because unfortunately that's the way we are in this country. You know, we don't let people be outcasted, you know, do something that's different than the norm at all. But you have to also think about the dedication it takes and what a different mental, psychological, and just physical strain it is on your body as an athlete. And to me, it really takes that athlete and puts them in another caliber, because not everybody can go through that and still play and start or whatever it is. You're really pushing yourself to a whole nother level. So to me, it's almost honorable where, you know, you have people on social media are just going to talk down about it. So
yeah, and another big problem in soccer, but I think in basketball and in the sport in general, but in soccer, because as you told, we cannot manage the climatic condition during the match or during the training, but is that the dehydration impact on physical performance, because many studies attest also that the soccer player in particular is often dehydrated, and I confirm that because usually I did a numerous test before training, never before match, because you know matches is a very particular moment of for the athletes, but before practice usually I try to predict the hydration state through a urine test. In particular, I use urine specific gravity or urine osmolality. And in particular, also in the young athletes, I found 60–70% of athletes that they aren't well hydrated before a training. That is a very huge number of athletes, if you think. 60–70% of the roster before the training, and this is happen every time in a week before the training. So and this is happening in a normal condition. I cannot believe what happened also during Ramadan. And I know that also a state of dehydration in soccer in particular is able to negatively affect some parameters, like, for example, sprint ability, dribbling ability, and also the decision-making index, that is considered the index to that identifies the ability to choose an appropriate decision on passage that determines an advantageous situation. This is true for soccer, but also I think for basketball.
So American football sees it too. As glycogen gets depleted, as carbohydrates are not there, their decision-making changes. And then when you go into the elements of hot and cold, it gets even worse. So we know that if you don't have carbohydrate, your brain uses carbohydrates as fuel. It's not using anything else. So I think when you're in ketosis, it might start to use ketones, but in general, your athlete is using carbohydrates for fuel for your brain. And so it does affect your ability to play for sure. Like I said, not just physically, but also mentally. I feel like we've touched on a lot of areas. We're going to start to wrap it up. If you have anything that you feel we should talk about that we didn't speak about, or anything that's important for our listeners to know about, you know, let's talk about it now and let them know.
Another thing that I wanted to add about hydration state, but because it's very particular about for Ramadan, is the use of glycerol. I don't know if you never use this. I never use, because I have some colleague uses that glycerol for help rehydration and maintain hydration state. But what many colleagues say to me is that they have a lot of side effects about gastrointestinal situation too, and some colleagues stopped to use the glycerol for
I never
maintain
used
the
it. It was banned by WADA until 2018. So for me, I never really got into it because it was banned when I first started. And like you said, it can definitely have some effects on the GI tract. So I stay away from glycerol. It's kind of
yeah.
like bicarb. I don't mess around with bicarb either because I just am not trying to give somebody a stomach problem. So those are two
Yeah, I'm
I
agree.
don't really mess around with. But do you have some colleagues that use it to maintain hydration?
Yeah, some colleagues use it, but they stop. What I know is that they stop it to use and they don't use again because the side effects are more than the benefit that you can get from glycerol. So I never tried. I never tried. I don't know if you have a very very important match like a World Cup, like a Olympic game. I don't know. The year before this important game, you can try during your Ramadan to take and understand if is helpful for you. But I think that is difficult, or this is what some of my colleagues say to me, and for this I never tried. I never tried
So
of
just so
this.
people understand, so glycerol would be in a drink and it changes your osmotic radiation. So basically your osmolarity of how much fluid you can retain and hold in. And so they say that you can hold in up to an extra liter of fluid by using glycerol, which is a pretty big amount. But the side effect is it really bad gastrointestinal problems. So everybody's probably different. You have to play around with it. Like she said, I definitely wouldn't try it before a game or a match. This would be something you do at an off-season time period, or not before you're weighing in for something, if you're working with a fighter. So if you ever want to mess around with no matter what you're doing to change to an athlete, never do it before a game or a match or when you're like deep in season and competition. It's definitely, you have to do these things in off season. But that's kind of the thing with glycerol is that supposedly it helps you to retain enough fluid to stay hydrated. And that's why WADA had it banned for so long because they looked at it as a performance enhancing drug. And then I guess somehow it was petitioned that it wasn't.
Yeah, and I saw also that some colleagues that work in worst weather condition, like in Singapore during the summer, in which the weather condition is very very bad and the temperature is very very high. They can also organize all meal, yes, and also keep the athletes in air conditioned room before the training, and also medical staff have an extra ice pack, cold towels, and help the athletes to thermoregularization of the body. And they know also that some athletes, but not everything, do a mouth rising with water or with water and carbohydrates too, because the research, the scientific literature said that help your brain, also your muscle, your body, as you ingest the carbohydrates and water for the first 15-20 minutes. But the mouth rising is the condition in which you take the water or water with carbohydrate inside your mouth and then you throw away. So
Yeah.
you definitely you cannot eat or drink the water. But some athletes don't want to do that during Ramadan too, because the religion, the condition cannot permit to do that. And some athletes yes, some athletes no, depend. But I think that is helpful, can help in some particular situation or if the athlete is in a very very difficult moment.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about Italy and the United States, but I can imagine some places that are even hotter, what they have to deal
Yeah.
with. Like if you're in Brazil this time of year where it's, the dead heat of summer, we take for granted that we have a little bit better temperatures where we're at. Even being in Miami, it's still not that hot out, where you're losing that much water. So I'm sure there's other places that have to deal with it a lot more than we do.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming on. You know, I don't know if you want to share with the followers how people can reach you, if they have any questions. I know you're in the United States every once in a while. So if you want to, you know, just tell listeners where they can find you or reach you, or email, whatever it might be.
Yeah, I give you my email for sure, and if you can share. But I don't know if I can say it. My email is Julia dot Baroncini. That is my name and my surname. 11 net@gmail.com. This is my email, and I'm available to you if you have any question. Was a big pleasure to speak with you, Jaclyn, today, and thank you to having me today.
Thank you. I will put her email in the show notes, and then also I'll put your LinkedIn in there. So if people have any questions, they want to link into you as well. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
And thanks to everybody for listening. I hope we were able to enlighten you and answer some questions you may have had about nutrition around Ramadan fasting. And give us a follow and join us again next time. Thank you. Okay, let me figure out how to stop recording.